Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Fanbase Weekly podcast. This is a special edition of the show as we're conducting a panel discussion on the recently released 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. Before we introduce our guest, I want to note that all episodes of the Fanbase Weekly podcast this month are sponsored by the creators of Sherlock Holmes and the Empire Builders. We look forward to sharing details about the graphic novel series with you later in the show. My name is Bryant, Dillon. I'm president of Fanbase Press and co-host of the Fanbase Weekly podcast. I'm also the writer behind several projects, including the horror graphic novel Something Animal and Identity Thief. And I will be your moderator for this discussion. For you out in the podcast world, I guess I'm the voice in your head right now, so feel free to refer to me as Old Nick. But I've got a few other voices here with me. Maybe they're my fingers, maybe they're not. We'll find out. Let's go ahead and introduce these panelists. First up, we've got Christian Angeles. He is the editor-in-chief of TheDeMonster, working directly with content from creator Sammy DeMonster. He is the former senior editor at The Beat and a key part of its Eisner Award-winning team. And currently he's working on a zombie comic called Dead on the Inside and is a lead editor on the comic book adaptation of the popular New Jersey play The Devil and Daisy Dirt, produced by Kevin Smith. Christian, fantastic to have you back, especially after you joined us for the previous film discussion.
Oh yeah, thank you for having me again. I really love zombies still, and I couldn't wait to talk about this one again too with you guys. So yeah, thanks. And
excellent. We are definitely going to have some good conversation ahead. We're also joined by Phillip Kelly. He's a Fanbase Press Contributor. Phil is a member of the podcast group POPSKL as well, and also a professional performer, writer, filmmaker, and comedian. Phil, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. You can call me Jimmy Kelly.
Excellent. And we have Claire Thorne. She's my co-host of the Fanbase Weekly podcast and author of A Geek's Guide to Cross-Stitching Journeys in Space, which you can get from Fanbase Press. Claire is also a member of the POPSKL Podcast Group. Claire, welcome.
I guess that makes me Jimmy the socially anxious, maybe?
We all get to choose our own Jimmy.
Our own Jimmy name.
Is anyone going to spell like the sprinkle, the Jimmy Sprinkles? I think someone has to do that, right? All right. Well, we've already spoiled a few things, so I will put out the spoiler warning. If you have not seen this film, we are definitely going to dive into all the spoiler territory. So go see the film and come back to this conversation later. For those continuing on, of course, 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple is a 2026 post-apocalyptic horror film. It's directed by Nia DaCosta. It's written by Alex Garland. And this film was shot back-to-back with its predecessor, which was 2025's 28 Years Later. This serves as the fourth installment overall in the 28 Days Later film series. The film picks up immediately following the events of the previous film. After being rescued by the Fingers, a gang of fighters led by the zealous Satanist Sir Lord Jimmy Crystal, played by Jack O'Connell, Spike, played by Alfie Williams, the hero from our previous film, is forced to join the violent cult. Dr. Ian Kilson, played by Ralph Fiennes, continues to build up the Bone Temple, an ossuary for those who have been killed in the rage virus epidemic, while the alpha-infected Samson, played by Chi Lewis Perry, repeatedly visits him. Kelson deduces that Samson is becoming addicted to the morphine from his blowgun, deliberately allowing himself to be drugged. Samson no longer attacks Kelson, and the two develop a friendship as his humanity begins to resurface. It's revealed that Jimmy often orders his gang to torture and kill captured survivors as a type of sacrifices to Old Nick, believing that Satan is his father and hearing his father's voice in his head. Eventually, Sir Jimmy leads the gang to the Bone Temple, where he meets Kelson alone, assuming that Kelson is, in fact, Old Nick. Now, upon discovering Kelson is not Satan, Sir Jimmy threatens to kill him if he does not pose as Satan and substantiate Sir Jimmy's leadership over the Fingers. Kelson agrees to play along, but fears that his research on Samson will be cut short if he's killed. In a premature attempt to grant Samson some sort of peace, Kelson administers him a cocktail of antipsychotics, hypothesizing that the rage virus causes aggression indirectly via psychotic hallucinations. That night, Kelson complies with Sir Jimmy's demands, impersonating Satan in a pyrotechnic-filled performance of Iron Maiden's The Number of the Beast, while exposing the gang to hallucinogens. Upon recognizing Spike, however, Kelson betrays Sir Jimmy by ordering the Fingers to crucify him. While he is overpowered by the others, Sir Jimmy manages to fatally stab Kelson in desperation. Spike comforts the dying Kelson as Sir Jimmy is crucified on an inverted cross. Spike and one of the Fingers, who reveals her name to be Kelly, leave for the wilderness. Samson arrives and is taken to be Satan by Sir Jimmy, and Samson also greets Kelson by name and thanks him as Kelson succumbs to his wounds. Subsequently, Samson carries Kelson's body away. Sir Jimmy is left to be attacked by the infected. Sometime later, we leap ahead in time, and Kelly and Spike are attempting to escape a group of infected, unaware that they are being observed by Jim from the first film, played by Cillian Murphy, and his teenage daughter Sam, who have broken off a history lesson about post-war remembrance to go to the stranger's aid. Now, the film has received positive reviews from the critics. The LA Times wrote, last summer's 28 years later introduced an alpha brute who kills his victims like a chef stems a strawberry, expertly ripping out skulls and spines with a yank. 28 years later, the Bone Temple stuffs the audience's brains back in. IO9 wrote that it's an excellent sequel that enhances its franchise, stands on its own, and excites us for what's to come. And on Reddit, one witty individual caught my eye and stated, quote, "Finally, a movie brave enough to ask, what if we just got high with the zombies?" End quote. Bravo. Bravo on that. One miscellaneous point of interest that I did come across that I wanted to share with everyone. In an AMA on Reddit, director Nia DaCosta revealed she would love to direct a live-action version of Robert Kirkman's Invincible. She wrote, quote, "The comic and cartoon are amazing. I know exactly how I would want to translate that world and that amazing father-son relationship to screen. I just also love the idea of making something in a superhero world that has some real grit and viscera and sex." End quote. All right. Well, let's dive in. As always, Phil, Christian, Claire, I want to know what you thought of this film overall. Is there something in a general sense of what worked for you and what didn't? And then, of course, given that it is part of a franchise, what makes this one stand out? What gives this an individual flavor if it has one? Christian, why don't you start us off?
Sure. It's so weird. Based from the last podcast and my utter love of zombie talks, I normally love most things in the zombie genre, but for this movie, I'm actually one of the few people who didn't absolutely love it. And it's not because it did anything bad per se, as much as it was, I just felt like the first half of the film was very intentionally very visceral and very gritty. But I've seen stuff like that before in other zombie fiction, and so that part of the movie didn't really hook me. It wasn't actually until the second half when I actually kind of fell in love with it, kind of like in the first one, because it tried again to do something that was a little bit different in the sense that we explored different religious themes, and Satanism was a very big one in this one, and we looked at the idea of power dynamics and worship, I guess, and I think those particular themes being explored was a much more fascinating part to me than the actual zombies this time around, if that makes any sense. But I'm curious to hear what everyone else kind of thought about that.
It's an interesting thought, because I think one thing that these films have to compete with is at least the first, maybe the first two even, didn't have to, is we have been with things like The Walking Dead for decades now, and we have seen people brutalized. It is no longer a secret in the zombie films that, oh, the real bad guys are the people. It's about civilization eating itself more than like the zombies eating us. And so I completely hear some of that. There are times when, especially in the torture scenes, where I was like, this is a great version of something we've seen many times already. But it did stand out a little different for me. But I'll wait and say my thoughts to hear what Phil and Claire have to say. Phil, what were your thoughts, general reactions? What worked, what didn't?
I mean, I really loved it. I think Alex Garland is probably one of our better screenwriters around
Absolutely.
these days. Not only because, like, he's giving general audiences a bit of probably what they want with the zombie stuff like we're talking about, but he always manages to inject something significant, culturally significant or thematically significant into the stories he's telling. And yeah, it's just so much of it is woven together really beautifully, especially taking themes and ideas from the first film and kind of building on those in different ways. So I was pretty much transfixed from beginning to end of this film. Yeah.
Does it stand out for you in a certain way from the others? Does it feel like it's just a continuation, or does it feel like its own thing?
I mean, no, it feels like a proper continuation of at least the previous film, and ideas sort of dealt with in the first film. I can't say I'm a fan of the second film, 28 Weeks Later. I don't remember much of that film at all. It's been a while since I've seen it, but it didn't really stick with me. But otherwise, to me, this feels like the world that Garland and Boyle created initially, and especially in dealing with a lot of the same ideas that they've been dealing with. So, yeah.
Claire, what are your thoughts on the film?
I loved it. I really did love it. And I think it comes down to the fact that they executed on multiple thematic levels. Like there are a lot of tracks of theme that you could really stick to in this movie and you're satisfied by them. But there's like, they're talking about memory and the fact that, they're 28 years later, they can't, connect to what the world was like before any longer. And Kelson is desperately trying to do that in some ways. And they're also talking about, the exploitation of trauma and cult and all of those religious/cult themes that go along with that. They're talking about empathy, like radical empathy, and the delights of drug use. That's not the theme. I don't know. Anyway, but there's so many themes going on in this, and it's to the point of whether or not it fits in with the rest of the movies. Like I do, yeah, absolutely think that it does. Alex Garland has done such a good job of establishing like no central point. And I think that's one of the things about the first movie that really has always kind of stayed with me, is this vibe of this isn't just your typical storytelling. I don't have all of the right words to describe that, but when you think about the movie just before this, 28 years later, and then this one, like none of our storytelling expectations are really entirely met. Like we're given this kid, right? And we think we're going to follow his point of view, but I would argue like we don't really follow his point of view in
Right.
this movie. He's not that he's not the center. No, like there's no center. Alex Garland just doesn't give us a center in these things, and I think it works really, really well in telling these stories. That's probably, Philip, why you think like the second movie is a departure. It's just a departure from the vibe. I've gone back and watched it, and I do like the story that's being told there. There's nothing about it that I really dislike, but it just sits apart tone and storytelling technique and a lot of other things, I think, from the rest of the movie. But these movies 28 years later are just really just hitting the vibe and the visuals and the character development, like all of those things just feel really meshed together in a really good way. Like very, yeah, it does work for
It,
me.
I agree with a lot of what you said, Claire, because I feel like it is what is works for me so well with Alex Garland beyond his intelligence and his attention to detail is that he is. I feel like I'm attracted to storytellers who know how to play with the tropes and the structure, but then will take you in a completely unexpected direction over and over, especially multiple times in the same story. And I feel like that's what I find consistently in Alex Garland. He'll set to the table and I'll think, we're having this dinner. And then, we're having hamburgers. And then he brings out like a salad. And I'm like, I never saw it coming, and I just find this so interesting too, because I think it's in all of his work. But if we look just at this new trilogy that they're working on, it's just even the iconography of the Bone Temple and Ralph Fiennes and how he looks like this crazy cannibalistic, like, where are we going? We're going into some sort of crazy, post zombie society. And then we end up finding the exact opposite. This one of the most caring, endearing characters that you have seen in a film. And the idea that you mentioned, Phil, too, I think another thing that attracts me to stories and why I find myself so excited that we're starting with this one in early on in the season for 2026 for the Fanbase Weekly is this is a great example of genre story that speaks to the times that we're living in multiple ways. It's not kind of like, oh, hey, let's make some, references. These movies are about the pandemic. They're about how we came out the other side. They're about the pain and suffering and trauma that we have all gone through and the way that it has shaped us and changed the world and what we have lost and what we have not yet dealt with. And I've only seen this film once, but I guarantee like there's going to be so much to take away from this. And so there's so many scenes when I start to think about it where I go, even if I can be critical, because I do agree with some of Christian's criticisms, even if I can be critical, Garland and DaCosta find a way to make things that are predictable in the genre new. Oh, we've seen the idea that maybe zombies can be cured or a zombie can start to communicate with people, but not like this. We've seen gangs and cults and these Mad Max type worlds arise from the apocalypse. But there's something very specific about the Jimmy cult, and we can get into that speaks to our world and how people survive after this and what they start to believe once the knowledge crumbles. So I don't know. I don't want to go on. I would rather go like given that I'm thinking of all these scenes, what scenes stood out to each of you? What were the standout scenes in this film? If you had to pick one that really hit you powerfully in any way, what would it be? Claire, why don't you start us off on this? What would be the scene that stands out in the film for you?
I mean, I just the earliest scene that I think that made me react like physically in the theater with like this just sense of glee was the moment that I realized that Samson and Dr. Kelson were going to sit down together and I'm like, oh my God, of course he's a drug addict. Of course he is. And that this is, and the realization that Samson would gravitate to something that brought him peace. Like even at that moment, I wasn't even thinking so far ahead to like, oh, this could be a treatment for a cure for what ails him. But it was just the idea that like, oh, there could be a method there of getting some measure of peace, of being quiet, of being calm and soothed, I guess. And then that started this delightful, I'm going to choose to think of it as a romantic comedy. Like it has all the rom-comness that I want. It's two people coming together, learning to communicate with each other, being nervous about what the other person's going to do to them. Like, they were both equally hesitant about, well, maybe not equally, because one doesn't rip the spines out of people, but still, like they were it truly like in a rom-com way, like coming together and learning to like coexist with each other and help each other and do good and just out of a sense of Kelson's again, it's like that radical empathy of like he's spent years working up to this moment. Um, yeah, it's just his whole character, everything that happens between them is just
Such
so
an
good.
interesting character too, because we also see like what is so interesting is he sits down with almost every other character in the film, in the film franchise. Like everyone has a moment to kind of like sit down with Kelson, and he just listens to them, and it reveals so much. It's the performance, it's the writing, it's such an interesting thing. Um, Phil, what's the standout scene for you?
I do think I was going to talk about the other conversation that he does have with Jimmy, Dr.
Yeah,
Kelson. It's I think it's really interesting to find ways to show your villain as being vulnerable and human and just as lost as everybody else in the story. And it was nice to have that moment where Jimmy was really grounded, and you saw just how everything. Gosh, there's multiple allegories going on here that I want to get into it at some point during this conversation, but
feel free to dive into
just
them.
the
Go ahead.
oh, okay,
Yes.
okay. Well, I mean, just like Jimmy's stunted at a certain age, right?
Yeah.
He's his trauma, the world getting cut off, is like his understanding of the world from that period in which he was a kid, and it's all been perverted. Like the I guess the Teletubbies stuff is a good example of that. Not only the religious stuff, obviously, literally turning the cross upside down. He's basically perverted everything in a sort of narcissistic way, which is what cult leaders do. It's what Trump does, and all these other people. But to your point that this is a lot about the pandemic, and I can definitely see that. I also think something that the first film really laid out is that this seems to only be happening on the island in the UK. Like it hasn't spread outside of that. They're all quarantined. So we're not only talking about a person in this that's been sort of stuck in a time and place, but a society as well, because it's been cut off from everything. And I think in the UK, that was very much felt just recently when they, a lot of political stuff sort of cut them off from the EU and did all that. And there's a lot of rage built among people who were told certain things about the world. And I think right now we see that really being mirrored here in the U.S. as we're cutting ourselves off from our allies and pushing everybody away. And the rage is really, really building. So it in that sort of empathy, that radical empathy that Claire talks about is in a world like that is really hard to get to find that grace for the people that have essentially raged and been left in this sort of state of just being stuck, right? So yeah, there's so much going on. I love this film so much. Sorry, I could keep going, but I think my favorite, one of my favorite scenes is the conversation between Jimmy and Dr. Kelson, because it really starts to get at that through characters, and like you said, Dr. Kelson seems to be able to get people just to drop their guard, and so that whole like interaction where Jimmy's just like, yeah, this is basically all bullshit was really lovely, but he needed to keep his power. He needed to keep his stranglehold on everybody that's following him, and so keep that lie up was really nice.
It's interesting because it makes me think of I think you were on this conversation, Phil, but it makes me think of our conversation with Predator Badlands, where you have this like really like just domineering father who has like this code you have to follow, and this the minute he's on the outs, he's like, forget the code, the rules are out, let's do and it's like we're seeing a lot of people commenting on this kind of pseudo machoism, this male fragility that's dominating and sort of is attached in many ways to this sort of, I don't know, this gathering of people looking for something in a world that seems lost now, Christian, what scene stood out to you?
So that's a hard one for me because again, I think I'm a little bit more critical of this movie than other people. Um, so one of the things I took away from this was this film was sort of a commentary on the nature of evil, particularly in bad situations, which is
Mm-hmm.
why I mentioned Satanism and the reverse cross being a symbol of the devil, and of course all the talks about, devil worship and whatnot. So like as a result of that, I think I came into this movie feeling a little differently because I felt like the first one was a lot more political and about geopolitics and particularly Brexit and a criticism of that. This time around, it felt more like, well, what happens when people with absolute like with power and authority who kind of manipulate what is quote unquote the truth, which is a very good allegory for today. What happens when they sort of run amok and do whatever they want, particularly because of the philosophy of nihilism, I guess, which I think was showcased really well with the Jimmies and the way it broke down and how it's completely being processed through early childhood trauma, I guess is the best way to put it, right? And creating a whole
Yeah.
cult and a whole belief around that. So like as a result, like it's not that it wasn't portrayed well. I think it was, and I think Nia DaCosta is a phenomenal director, and she's probably my favorite thing about this particular movie, because the style was great. But like as a result of that being the theme, I just wasn't as captivated because I think I've consumed way too much zombie stuff about that topic already, particularly every single iteration of The Walking Dead and every single zombie film you can imagine. So like at this point, I'm just done inundated with zombies and seeing this kind of thing play out before. So like for me, it doesn't hit as hard for other people, which is fine. Everyone's different. But then, as you mentioned, Bryant, like because that was the expectation, because like the first half of the movie was a lot of just depicting and setting it up.
Right.
When the second half hit, there were scenes which completely blew me away, particularly with Dr. Kelson and his response to the empathy of like being everyone's therapist, particularly with Samson, which that was when I was like, all right, now I'm actually really into this movie because that's what I genuinely want to see. And particularly Samson's arc, because I was like, how does this translate? Um, but then I think as a result of all of that, the thing that really blew me away that kind of just stole the show for me was literally the what is it, Dr. Kelson's Eddie moment from Stranger Things, if that makes any sense. The performance at the
Yes.
end.
Oh God, yeah.
Absolutely.
That was 100% when I was like, all right, fuck it, this is a great movie. Like, despite my criticism, that moment, like, and movies will do that sometimes. Like, I do believe that in the power of story, you can set something up and then just have one moment that easily makes it shine or completely ruins it. It's just how your relationship is, particularly with story. But for that moment, I was just like, that's such good performative art. It makes the character so well-rounded, and I think he represents the best and essentially our voice of
Yeah.
humanity. Because I was expecting Spike to be that this time around, but as you mentioned, like Spike didn't really do that much in this one. Not really.
Well,
Um,
yeah, Spike is almost. I mean,
yeah.
and there's a couple characters like this, but it's almost. I guess now I'm about to say it, I'm comparing to the scene you're talking, Christian. What is interesting is Spike is almost the embodiment of you got to do what you need to do to survive. This is, the civilization is dropped and you adapt to whatever you can. And all the other Jimmies are kind of that to some degree as well,
100%.
but they're just a little bit. Some of them are better at it, Some of them are less moral, less have more of an ability to be evil. But what I guess I find interesting about it, that even the torture scene, it's shot in a way we're led to believe that it takes a long ass time and it's wearing on the Jimmies. We see like them throwing up and becoming less enthused. Um, so it's not like they necessarily enjoy it. It's like an endurance thing to some degree. And I think the same thing about the scene you're talking about. It's such a bizarre scene to have Kelson be like, well, yeah, I'm going to dress up like the devil and pretend to be Satan and, do this theatrical performance that's going to blow people's minds. but you do what you need to do to survive, right? I mean, I guess that's what I find so interesting about that character is there's the plot story about just like these interesting things that are happening, but there's also this thematic idea of we all have to make concessions. We all have to make compromises with unsavory individuals, but we also have lines, and Kelson reaches that one, when he realizes Spike is one of the members of the gang, and he's like, I can't do this. I can't sell out the world just to survive. And I find that so interesting too, because I think that message begins to reverberate throughout the movie. Where's your line? Even oh, what's her name? Kelly. Yeah, she reveals her name's Kelly at the end. But when the Jimmies, I mean, she's such an interesting character because she's really capable, but she's someone who we see I think often in our own world, where they're like, I think this is all bullshit. I'm kind of going along with it, but I have the sense that the person up ahead doesn't actually know what they're saying.
I so appreciated the scope of characters that we get with the Jimmies, because you're right, Bryant. We've got the leader, which I spent most of the movie questioning myself as I watched, because maybe the center of this movie is Jimmy, the leader. Like I really think we explore his motivations and what's going on with him the most. I was constantly questioning how much of his own bullshit does he believe? Does he really buy into, or is it all performative and narcissistic and controlling? Like to what degree is that? And so, of course, when we get to the conversation with Dr. Kelson and we start to really see, and he starts to be honest to some degree, like that was very satisfying. But I so appreciated, as someone who has left religion and deconstructed from that, I appreciated the scope of characters in the Jimmies, the fingers, right? And Kelly is I identified with very, very much, because she is, yes, the character who all of these Jimmies, to some degree, the only thing they've ever been fed to some degree is the what Jimmy's given them. Like what do they know of the world outside of this superstition and this story and this ritual that they've been taught? And watching her coming to a natural disillusionment and coming to the, like, bringing herself to a point of, oh, I'm questioning shit. And but realizing that doesn't solve things, right? Just realizing that you're doubting about something does not get you out. It doesn't fix things for you. It doesn't make it easy to turn and walk away.
Well, she actually says there's nothing else out there. Like, this is the best there is. You know, and that's like buy in or be fucked.
And the cliff you're standing at the bottom of a cliff at that point and asking yourself, how do I climb up this mountain of figuring things out for myself? So yeah, I loved the variety that we got. And yeah, I think I just want to speak a little bit about the violence, because I think I felt that too in the movie, is like, oh, okay, this is all going to be very visceral. Everything's been very visceral in these movies.
Yeah, definitely.
I think something that hit me, though, by the end of the movie was, that felt like a secondary. If I'm thinking about what Nia DaCosta is thinking about in directing this movie, the violence feels very secondary and just like, oh, we need to have this here because, of course, we have to establish who Jimmy is. And at his core, Jimmy is the torture scene. You can't get away from that. Like, we can't not have the visceral nature of it because we have to understand who he is. But the violence felt routine. And as I'm saying it now, literally, I think that's a good thing, because that is the violence that Jimmy is. It's just routine. Like, this is just the next evening. This is just the weekend activity, right? This is just their next thing on their social calendar.
Well, and it's
you know what it reminded me of, Claire?
Okay,
No, it's just those old religious torture books and images you see in the old religious like documents, like tearing skin off, ripping
Visit
intestines
the
out
torture
through
museum.
It's
wheels, and
Fox's Book
it's
of Martyrs.
the
It's
Fox's.
Fox's Book
Yes,
of Martyrs.
exactly.
Yeah.
I,
I
I
still
I
have
knew
a
you would
copy
get
of
where I was
it.
going with that. I know. I knew you'd get. We talked about it,
Yeah.
and that's what that sort of skin ripping off and scene reminded me of was
Yeah.
all of those images of demons ripping people apart, and
And the fact that
I imagine.
I grew up in the 70s and 80s being taught to read, asked to read Fox's Book of Martyrs because it was
Yeah.
important for
Well,
me to learn what might happen to me someday and what I should aspire to be that
yeah.
kind of martyr. Like that was the religious
Well,
upbringing.
you can imagine then what Jimmy was probably taught when he was a kid, that this is what he's taken from all of his religious upbringing, or what he remembers of it. And to your point, because I was thinking this too, there's a specific element and put into these films where which characters are being taught about history. And they make a very specific point at the end of the movie where we're reintroduced to Killian talking with his daughter, that it's specifically a conversation about history. And as you know, the phrase goes, you forget about history, you're bound to make the same mistakes. These Jimmies don't know anything about history. And you were basically touching on that, Claire. So I just wanted to sort of, because I've been thinking about that as well. And our young man Spike, our young boy, was also taught about history and had schooling, and so he brings something different. And anybody who seems to remember the world the way it was, is a little more. I imagine it'd be a little more difficult to pull them into this cult. I guess is what I'm saying, because they have an idea of history.
It might be, but it's also like I think the film is also just about, because when we talked about in the last film, the first film in this trilogy, there was so much conversation from Garland and Boyle about how these films were about the regression of society, and a fear of regression. And I feel like this one, especially when we're looking at like the Jimmies and contrasting him with Kelson and his journey with the rage victims, whether we're talking about the ones he turns into a memorial or the Alpha, I feel like it's all about like, hey, like we haven't, as a society, as a globe, a world, gone, like we went through something horrific, and it's infected everyone. It's affected everyone. We're all traumatized by this pandemic, and it has led to these various things. It's given power vacuums for people to rise and convince people that there's only this new horrible way, to eat each other and everyone out for themselves. We have people who are trying desperately to keep the old world alive, and I think the world itself though is hurting. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting too personal with the film, but I'll just share it. I feel like the pain that I feel and have felt for the last 10 years that won't go away, which I attribute to just the trauma. It's not like I'm particularly, this specific thing is what the issue is. But I think that we all, as individuals, to some degree, feel like, hey, there was an old world and there's a new world. And we live in the new world, and the old world we think about it all the time, but it's gone. It's a different world. It's a different way.
Like Kelson says, we don't remember it.
Yeah.
We don't remember it. We don't really remember what it's like, because memory is not a reliable narrator as much as we would want it to be, or feel like we understand what the good times were.
But he speaks so clearly to, like, the way that Garland writes that, the idea of like, I don't remember the specifics, but there was an order that's not here. There was a foundation that is no longer present. Christian, you were going to say something.
No, I was going to say, I think you're wholeheartedly in agreement. Wholeheartedly in agreement. If you look at the timeline, something happened in 2016 that kind of, I feel like, caused a lot of the changes that we see today, that changed the world essentially, particularly politically, but I won't get into there because I don't want to piss anyone off. And turning back into memory, that's one of the reasons I think like as weird as it sounds, the Alpha, his storyline is my favorite in this movie
Absolutely.
because it's a great example of that, particularly with the element of the moon. It's like this last memory that made him happy, and then how that channeled into other forms of memories that reminded him of his humanity. Only, of course, the second to acknowledge that to be in conflict with his new self, like the new world that he's embraced, because then all the other, I guess, rage virus zombies, whatever you want to call them, noticed immediately. It's like, what's wrong with this guy? But he was still himself. He was still the alpha. But yeah, like I do think change is happening right now, and a big reason I keep stressing cult and Satanism is because, in a lot of ways, it's saying what happens when leaders essentially manipulate their power and create vacuums of what could be considered a cult. Although today maybe people don't consider that, even though it's obvious to me at least. But yeah, that's all.
Well, I think we're definitely pushing. I mean, I don't think we have to be too shy with this film because I feel like this film is very direct in what it's speaking to, and I think it's saying, we're seeing violence in our streets right now. We're seeing excuses for murder, for horrible treatment of individuals, for taking away rights that we thought were not able to be broken, not able to be taken away, that defined us. So I think we are trapped in this thing where we are in the Jimmy cult to some degree, like we are being told this is the only way, either skin these people or maybe, hey, maybe one of my guys is gonna die and you can replace them. I mean, that it's like you never know when you're gonna be on the chopping block. Is the situation that that cult provides, that anxiety. And I feel like in a way we all live like that in America right now. We don't know what's coming next, and even if we consider ourselves closer to Kelson, very few of us have that radical empathy. Most of us feel like we're in the fight of our lives and we've got to kill the other person on the other side.
Well, most of us probably feel like Spike. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
what to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I'm just kind of here. Like, what do I do? What can I do?
Yeah.
Except for sit back and quietly suffer as all of the, you know what I mean? As as everything that's horrible is happening
Well,
around
and how
you.
poignant is that scene when
it's-
he helps the pregnant woman, and then she, rightly so, was like, "Fuck you, get the hell out of here."
Yeah.
Seriously.
It's a great
Well,
scene.
and I love that the representation of the empathy that Kelson have is not just a blind character flaw
Yeah.
level empathy. He is every single day, every single, like, everything he does is him dealing with the tension of, I want to deploy my empathy as much as I can, up to the point of where it's stupid.
Right.
It's and that tension is constantly there with Samson, with Jimmy, with the while he's performing, like you can constantly see him trying to keep that balance of, I'm going to try to be true to myself. I'm going to do that in a radical way that seems crazy to everybody else around me, but also not being stupid about it, because there is a point where empathy is no longer the correct course of action or the answer or what's best for anybody.
He knows when Jimmy has to be crucified,
Yeah.
and he has no problem doing that.
Yeah.
But you know what? Well, let me just go ahead, Christian. I'll go jump in.
I was gonna say thank you for bringing it up, Carissa, because like I 100% agree. And then weirdly enough, Philip, even though you said Spike is the like sort of the lens that we look into, I relate so much more to Kelson, and it drives me crazy. And I do think that we are at a boiling point for people like me who are trying to keep shit together with empathy, but it's hard. It's hard right now. So yeah, I think that speaks to reason about the powerful themes of the story. That's all.
It's interesting too. I guess the two things that I would say from what you both have said, Claire and Christian, is I find it very interesting that Kelson does know, he does have the way, as you're saying, this empathy that has an intelligence to it. It's not foolish. It's not a foolish empathy. But the thing that really stood out to me, Claire, that what you said is he knows he's attempting to be true to himself, and that's what struck me throughout the film. And I guess this is something I've carried in my life that I don't feel like everyone else feels the same way, but I feel like Kelson maybe does. And that's we have no control over anything. We don't know how we're going to die. We can control very little about the world. We can put things out into the world. But when you begin to think of yourself as able to affect the world, I feel like you lose something. You go down a rabbit hole that perhaps is not beneficial for you in any way. It either serves your ego or it depresses you or whatever. But you can know what you can do. You can be true to yourself despite the chaos, despite the world. It's not easy, but I feel like it at least allows you to have sanity throughout the transitional periods of your life. And that's what I see about Kelson. Everything has fallen away. He feels the same pain that everyone else feels. We see him looking at photos and lamenting a world that's gone, lamenting people that are not there, lamenting that he can't reach everyone. I even think when he talks to Jimmy, there is a sense of like, this is a broken individual I have empathy for. It's sad that this person is this person this way,
Mm-hmm.
But he is the one character in the film that I think knows who he wants to be. And he even says it in this film. He's like, I'm okay dying. If tomorrow I die, it's okay. I've built this memorial. I've lived my life the way I've lived. And Claire, you made a point about him interacting with the infected. I think sometimes he does do quote unquote stupid things, but he only does them when he wants to. It's his choice. And there's so much about that,
Yeah, I think he absolutely has a suicidal flirtation. He's playing Russian roulette with Samson a little bit by taking drugs with him and putting himself in a vulnerable place. And I think that is very purposeful. I think that he's very
he
purposeful
believes
about
in
that.
it, right? I think
like
it's a choice for him. He's like,
accepts,
this is worth it.
Yeah.
Like when he wakes up at that scene and he says, "Oh, I still have my head." We get the indication like, oh, he was okay if this went bad, and it was
absolutely.
like, oh well. But he thinks that connecting with these individuals is worth it because that's what he's trying to do with his life. And I wonder if there's a message here, and I would ask each of you like what you think. Is there a message here that we have lost that in our society? We're looking to others for direction. We're looking to the world for purpose, but maybe we have forgotten that internally this is where we have to find it inside, that we have to find out if you die tomorrow, how do you want to live? What do you want to be remembered for? What do you stand for, even if it does, you don't, you're just dust. And because all that is there is you, I don't know. Maybe I'm getting too philosophical, but what do you think? Go ahead, Christian.
Okay. What is it? No, I do think like it's weird because I relate to Kelson's mission a lot. The empathy is definitely a big theme of this one and trying to give a better sense of understanding. But I think the problem is because you have such cultural differences, because there's so much conflict, is particularly yes in this world in the movie, but then also it's sort of metaphorical for our world today.
Right.
You kind of have to do the show and dance. You have to constantly change the way you present your things and make yourself incredibly vulnerable, including, of course, risking getting your head ripped off, which is why, like, again, I get that and I do relate to it, but I'm also just like, that is incredibly tiring. And I do think I mean, we said we're doing spoilers. By the end of it, of course, he of course, loses his life because of taking this particular route. And I'm like, is there any way to do this without doing the Jesus allegory? Because I mean, again, religious symbolism in this is quite a lot.
Sure.
And he literally is being carried off like the son of Satan, I guess, in this case, sort of the Christ story. And so like, can you do the empathy thing? Can you connect without seeing somebody sacrificed or some sort of cost? And if you look at monomythic storytelling, if you look at hero's journey type stuff, there's always the mentor that loses themselves along the way, or the great sacrifice that has to be made for everyone to come together. And I'm like, yeah, that's the formula and it's been done and there's a reason we connect to it, but is there a better way to connect with people? Is there a better way to care?
Let's dive into that a little bit more, because I would love to ask you a follow-up, because I can hear my my beloved Marxist brother-in-law in my ear saying, "You damn right." Like he would say, like, you know what? These stories are they don't help us. They don't help us because we have been through this where we have done radical empathy. We have reached out to the other side, and how many lives have to be lost, how much pain has to happen, how much suffering has to happen before we realize that that is a fairy tale. So what are your thoughts on that, Christian? Where do you see the truth? Because I would argue that I don't know that the film necessarily gives us an answer as much as it poses a lot of options for us to discuss. But what are your thoughts? What do you think?
I 100% agree with that. Like, I don't I don't think the film does present an answer. Um, I think it's left for interpretation, which makes it kind of like a good particular ending, which is why again I like the back end more than the front end. Because the front end is like I'm so sick of misery in this world today already. It's like I'm kind of and I've also just watched way too many episodes of The Walking
Sure.
Dead. But man, like all the Negan stuff, I'm just like yeah, I've seen something like this before. But essentially coming back to it, I don't have an answer either. I just know what feels right. And I think for like I know what feels right for me. And I think that when it comes down to being your authentic self and trying to do the best, and having the only option being in this current state of life, like the things that we have control over, it just comes down to you and how you accept what's happening now and sort of your reaction to the moment. And I wish there was a better answer than that because it sounds like such bullshit. But I do think that's kind of just the situation we're in today,
I
which
think
is
you're
why,
I
yeah.
think you're exactly right, though. I totally agree with you because I feel like I think that goes back to what I was sensing about Kelson, where I feel like Kelson, maybe that's the best life that we can have is if you are living in the the apocalyptic ashes of the world. All you can do is go, what am I going to build? What am I going to do for me? Um, I mean, my bone temple is Fanbase Press, this little thing that stands, while the world burns around it. And there's lots of reasons I can go, hey, there's no reason to do this, but it gives me a certain satisfaction and allows me to have conversations like this one, which I feel are important. And I guess that's the thing, I find a personal stake in it. I wonder if that is part of that message. But I would throw it out to Phil and Claire. Just to reiterate, like the two things that we're trying to, juxtapose here are like, is this film being too leaning too much into the radical empathy and maybe convincing us that once again, reach out to the other side again and again in detriment to ourselves, or is there something? Is there a different message in this that you're taking away? Is there something from Kelson that speaks to being your own castle? I guess in the chaos.
I do find it interesting is Kelson isn't trying to change the society as a whole. Like he's working on one individual, and I think you can shift the dialogue further. You can change somebody more when you're working one-on-one with someone as opposed to trying to convince a mob to change.
It's a human connection.
Yeah, very human, very specific, very... Yeah, I mean, we've seen that happen in the real world where, just a few years ago, somebody who was a member of the KKK was talked out of it. And it was, reported on and talked, and these two people, a black man and a white KKK guy became really good friends. So that gentleman wasn't trying to change the KKK. He was trying to change that one person. And I wonder, there was a right-wing agitator that showed up in Minneapolis just the other day and got mobbed by the protesters. And one dude protected him and pulled him out of there. And I wonder how that's going to affect and influence that guy. I hope it does.
I hope
you can hope that, this person who I came here to hate and to talk against literally saved me from a mob. What I would hope something like that would at least crack his ideology a little bit. And you see that happen in this film where he's working on one person. He's trying to crack this one person and not necessarily trying to change the world. And I think there's more hope to be found in something like that than there is in, trying to change everybody all at once.
Phil, do you have, I guess the one question I would want to ask about that is, I feel like these films are imagining a world beyond, we're living in the second or third or fourth generation of the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah.
And in the same way, we are kind of living in our own world, in multiple generations have made these efforts through nonviolent protests, through empathy, through the systems. And I think there's a sense now that is foolish to some degree, that perhaps that is a tool of the system to keep us exhausted, to keep us going after that. Do you doubt any of that, or do you still feel like the best approach is that kind of radical empathy, one-on-one, connection to each other, or are we searching for something else these days?
That's a big question.
I don't know it is.
I don't know if I have an answer for that necessarily. I mean, I think in the world right now, in which there is less and less in-person human connection, where most of it's online rhetoric, and when you're trying to change somebody's mind online, forget it. Sure. Fucking forget it. Like, there's basically no point.
You don't even know if you're talking to a real person half the time.
Yeah, exactly. And it feels exhausting to do something like that, and it does exhaust your battery, doing something like that. And I there's a level of individualistic self-care in our society that is definitely important. But I think it also allows us to back off of really confronting people one-on-one in a very real sense sometimes. And I think online gives us this sort of very unreal sense of the world. And it backs us off from dealing with people in person then, because we're like, fuck that guy, because I know what these people are like online. And it's, I think everybody has that issue. Not only people with high levels of empathy or people who are trying to be very empathetic towards the other side, but I mean, this is how the rage is like amplified. Yeah. It's all rage, that's how we deal and interact with everything online. And the one thing we need less of is that. These films, literally, they're rage zombies. Like, it's a rage. The infection is literally called rage, people. It's on the nose. Like, come on. Like, rage is not good. It doesn't fix anything. And there's certain, times and periods, obviously, where anger is needed and justified.
Sure.
And
violence has a purpose at times.
Yeah, but how you funnel that rage on a day-to-day basis, or how that you funnel it's going to continue dismantling society regardless of what your message is. And I fall into the trap. Oh boy, do I get angry at people online sometimes. And when I'm doing it, I know it's not helpful. I know it's not going to do anything. But for 1 second, I feel satisfied somehow.
Well, in many ways,
I've just made the world a little bit worse.
In many ways, we don't end up being, as most viewers, I think, don't end up being a member of Jimmy or being Kelson as much as we relate to certain individuals or Spike. I think we end up being what this film changes for the 28 Days franchise, where it's like, we're those people that are just trying to survive, and we see someone with a rage infection, and we're like, well, shoot that guy. And now suddenly we're being introduced into, well, that might not be a rage zombie. That might be someone who can be cured. That might be someone who can come back. And they're not even happy. Like, they're not coming to kill you because that's what they want to do. They're tortured inside as well. Mm-hmm. It's really compounding. Claire, why don't you give us final thoughts on sort of this topic?
Again, I'm going to go back to Kelly and identifying with the person who is separating herself for the first time from an ideology that was all-consuming and presented itself as being the answer or like the way to be, right? And I think, and again, and that goes along with Kelson's daily striving to walk the line and deploy empathy, radical empathy, but also be smart about it and have that empathy be well thought out. And I think my bottom line is that I hesitate strongly. I react viscerally to any idea that there is a solution. And that sounds really pessimistic, but I don't think that's how humanity works. I don't think that there is an ideology, be it Marxist, be it right-wing conservatism, be it whatever it is, right? There is no one ideology that can steer the ship, that can make everything okay, that is the right answer, the way to do things. But, and that's the grand problem with humanity, is that we are a society, a planetary society that is comprised of who individuals who have to make their own choices every day. And if we are truly going to create the society that we want, I think we say we want, we have to afford every individual the freedom, radical freedom, to be who they want to be and do what they want to do. And it is a daily individual like response system of how we react to that and what we accept and what we don't accept. And there's no single ideology that can give us a roadmap for that. It is just going to be what Kelson's do. Well, like maybe the answer is just being what Kelson is, stripped of ideology. He's not a cult. He's not Satan. He's not a leader. He didn't bring people to him and say, hey, you need to do what I'm doing every day. The answer might just be a Kelson and let other people be their own Kelsons unless they're harming you. And then, it's all becomes very, very complicated and difficult. And that's just the way it's going to be. And I don't have an answer. Maybe we shouldn't have an answer. I don't know.
I think the answer really is we should just study dance like Dr. Kelson, because apparently he's phenomenal at it.
You guys, the Duran
in the
Duran
in the bunker, don't lose those.
Yeah.
Duran.
I saw someone on Reddit who was like, I love that like he just wandered like hundreds of miles to make the best vinyl collection ever. And I was like, I didn't think about that. He probably picked up some of those vinyls somewhere.
It's amazing.
But no, Claire, I think that is really well said, honestly, and I hadn't thought of it, but it is the way that I believe we find a path forward. It is what I think Kelson is. I think the idea, it reminds me of one of the most poignant things that I think was written for the series Angel, where the whole series about redemption, and at some point they tackle the topic of what is the point of redemption when you're trying to redeem yourself? Is it a chart where you're ticking off like little tasks with an end goal, or is it a way of living? And it comes down to a saying where they kind of get like, we won't ever topple the great evil. That's not going to happen. It will always exist. And so in many ways, nothing we do matters because nothing will ever change. But if nothing we do matters, then all that we're defined by is what we do. That's all that exists in the world. And so that's what I see in Kelson, and what I see in what you're saying so well, I think, is the world can change. And I think we need to believe that the world can change, but we don't necessarily change the world as individuals. We have to make the choices for how we live our lives based on what we value, what we believe in. And naturally we'll interact with other individuals and those things coalesce. We have to be open to others. We have to be open to human connection, but we can't be so egotistical to think that we're going to be Anakin Skywalker and bend everything to our will. It just takes you down the wrong path.
It does, always. Being the chosen one essentially leads you to be the chosen one in the wrong way, if that makes any sense. But yeah.
Well, I mean, Kelson is the idealistic version of what a doctor should be.
Right.
There to heal and fix everyone regardless of who you are. And in a sense, he's a little bit like Doctor Who in that regard. Honestly, he's a kind of a cross between Doctor Who and from Apocalypse Now.
The bald guy?
Yeah, what's his name?
Marlon Brando's character.
Brando. I
why
can't
can't
remember
I think
the
of his
character's name, but yeah.
Oh my God, why can't I think of his name?
Go up the river, find him. Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah. I'll remember in the second half.
Yeah,
of this
same
podcast.
here.
Yeah.
But you know what? We do have to we are going to take a break in a minute, but we just have to give a quick shout out to Ralph Fiennes, because what a performance!
Yeah.
How captivating! And then when you put it juxtaposed with the characters that he's played in things like, Schindler's List or some of these other horrific villainous characters, I cannot believe that you can sit down with him in this movie and you just feel like you want to spend more time with him. He has the same effect that he has on the other characters he has on the audience. I think we feel that, we're hungry for that. And I'll let you all kind of stew on this so that we can come back to the second half. One thing I would propose is, I think that hunger is continued on in the ending, where we finally see Jim. We have the old theme kick in, and it's, again, so minimal dialogue, but so important. We see our two characters, Spike and Kelly, being chased by infected. It's a classic scene out of any of the 28 Days Later. Oh no, they're being chased, they're through the field, what are we going to do? And we're brought back to these characters. Someone on Reddit related Jim's reappearance to something like, oh, I bet it's going to be like The Force Awakens. Luke Skywalker, have that kind of feel of like, oh my gosh, the hero is back. And I don't see these series at the same thing. This is not a fairy tale. This is a very grounded series. But there was such a moment, the way it was handled, of like, oh, this presence is returned to us. And then the idea that his daughter says, are we going to help them? And he says, of course. Because it's in juxtaposition to everything we've seen in the film. No one else is helping people behind Kelson. We don't help people. We're out for ourselves. Here's the old world saying, hey, those values still exist. Someone's holding them. Someone's teaching against fascism. Someone's teaching world history. Someone is out there to help people when they're in trouble. Let's come back and discuss that in a minute. I want to hear what your guys' thoughts are. We'll be right back, audience. All right, welcome back to our discussion on 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. We've danced around on characters, on themes. I'd love to jump back into themes and tackle anything that we haven't touched on, but let's start where we left off. I was proposing to you about the ending, that perhaps there is something in this movie about the hunger that we are feeling. What reminds me of is the response to the Superman trailer. When the Superman trailer came out a year or so ago, there was such a cultural response to it. I think because we're so hungry to have someone not saying, fuck that guy up, hurt that person, do this, I think we're looking for kindness and empathy in our world, even if we are guarded with it. Maybe like Kelly as a character, And I feel like this film is hinting at what's to come. I mean, Nia DaCosta said that, I think you noted this, Christian Angeles, that this film was about exploring the nature of evil, and that the next film is going to be exploring the nature of redemption, even though she's not involved with that. And so this I guess the ending, at least the way I interpret it, kind of speaks to that. It seems like we're going back not only in a meta way to old characters and an old way of looking at the zombie movie, but also an old way of living. And that's kind of what Kelson speaks to, about like this old world, the structure to it. Jim doesn't hesitate. We're going to help these people. But it seems like a dated way of thinking. We were just discussing last half about like, hey, should we have less empathy? Are these movies convincing us to have too much empathy? So what are everyone's thoughts? Do you see this as a theme in this movie? What do you think about that ending? And what does it mean for you, I guess, in regards to the themes that we see present in the film? Phil, why don't you start us off on this one?
I mean, Claire has kind of talked about this a little bit in regards to Kelson. There is a calculated empathy that I think is worth exploring. I think unfettered empathy maybe is the wrong path, because I think it's exhausting. Personally,
everyone gets burnout. Everyone gets burnout.
And it can open you up to um, I not just like being exhausted, but I think like unfettered empathy opens you up to uh, a lack of sort of, for lack of a better term right now, like logic. And I think there has to be some level of logic in how you deal with people, and maybe I don't know, man. I'm fucked. Like I don't know what I don't know what the best way forward is, because I think sometimes people experiencing like a trauma will knock them out of their way of thinking. You know, and that's a big emotional shift, not a logical shift.
Yeah, right, right.
And we, I mean, maybe we get that a little bit with Kelly, where there's like an emotional push that kind of breaks her from this. But she's also seeing a very logical thing in how she's noticing Jimmy respond to things and looking at things. She talks to Spike about how I saw the way he reacted. He had no idea what this was. There's a logic there. Mm-hmm. She's smart about it, even though she's kind of been led down this emotional path, a deprivation of logic. You know, logic's been suffocated out of their little Jimmy cult.
Well, and Phil, I think what breaks her out that you're mentioning, and you tell me if you disagree, when those final words from Kelson, I think, are what's really shakes her or projects her forward. When he says, "There's no devil, there's just people."
Yeah.
You know, and it's a message of empathy as he's dying. It's just us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kelly again is the one coming out of pure superstition, pure ideology, into when we see her, like you're saying, Philip, starting to deploy the scientific method, right? Like she's observing and coming to a conclusion based on her observation. And I think it's absolutely vital that she's the one who has witnessed what Kelson was doing with Samson. She doesn't understand it. She misinterprets it in the only way she can interpret it at the time. But it is this, we're coming out of, and then I would expect the next movie, in talking about redemption, to at least partly be taken up with the idea of her passing along that story. Because if Kelson's work is going to move forward, someone has to know about it. She's the only one who can really describe what that work was at this point. So I think it's going to be fascinating to watch her, like, because she's now there, she's going to arrive, we would presume, at a place of education and knowledge and kind of hope. That's the feeling, you get from the gymnast at the end, all of the gym at the end of the movie. I was so excited to be able to tell that story, have somebody draw the right conclusions from it, go back and, everything that we need to have for redemption is in that bunker, is in Kelson's bunker, in terms of notes and what to do, and
how historically accurate too in so many ways. Because I mean, Garland is always pulling things from the world around him, and it just makes me think, like, almost like the reason that this is in the film, and I could be wrong about this, but is that we need to be reminded that, like, when you're buried in this kind of world that feels like everything's gone, you forget that things can change. You forget that there's unpredictability, and that unpredictability can come in many ways. It could be bad, it could be good, but it could be someone with radical empathy who does things that no one has ever done before, just to see if they're possible. And then you get something like penicillin, and it changes the world. And they have the empathy to say, I'm giving it away. I don't need it. Like, I think in some ways the film is trying to say, like, don't get locked into, and maybe it's not saying this, maybe this is just what I'm taking away, but don't get locked into this ideology of, we are in shit and we will forever be in shit, and because of that I have to live as this monster to survive it. I don't know, Christian, what are your thoughts on this, on the ending and the return of Jim and stuff?
I'm excited for the return of Jim. Really good seeing the daughter. I really love the quote, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. I thought that was a really good example of it all coming together connecting with the past and the present. Really curious to see how Spike and what is her name again? Sorry, I always forget.
Kelly.
Erin? Kelly, yeah. How they join the fray, and then the dynamics between the bunch. I guess for me though, the ending, I was so left ambiguous as to what exactly happened, particularly with Samson. And was he cured, or was it more of like a
Yeah.
treatment? Because like from the way that Kelson
Yeah.
was describing it, it seemed like he was more treating the symptoms than actually curing the
I
rage.
don't think there's a psychiatric drug you can give someone who that just cures them and lets them
Maybe.
go forward unmedicated into the future. Like that's not a thing, I don't
No.
think.
But he did do.
Yeah.
I guess where they have like the mystery, if you will, is like he was saying to him like, I only have enough morphine to get you this far. But then he was also like that last night or before that last night, he was saying I might die tonight, so I'm going to do this rapid fire, theory that I have. So
Yeah.
I guess what I would say is I don't know. I think that is ambiguous, Christian. Is maybe he is cured, or maybe he's cured to a point where he will. I don't know. The more I think about it, the more I think though that you and Claire are probably right. What I think was going to happen is we will see someone discover notes from Kelson, and perhaps there will be enough of a recognition or humanity within Samson that he won't just rip their heads off. But he
Well,
probably
yeah.
won't. He probably won't come up to them and be like, "Have you met my friend Kelson?"
Well,
It kinda looks like that happened, though, personally.
they're-
What is
they-
what is he doing with Kelson? I need everybody's theories. What do you think he carried Kelson off? Is he gonna go like keep him?
I think he's going to bury him.
Somewhere?
Honestly, I
Do you think
give
he'll
maybe.
gonna
bury him? Does he understand
Or at least
that?
have some sort
think he
of
does. I think
ceremony
he
for
does.
like he's dead, he goes to this place. That just seems like I feel like what we're seeing with him is he's doing human things, like the rubbing
Yeah.
of the berries on his clothes, and so taking Kelson after he's dead and putting him somewhere that is a symbol of death, or appropriate
just-
place of death. Yeah,
Really
Yeah,
fascinated
they're-
with what Samson's idea of a
Yeah, what that is.
memento mori would be, because
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be even
But
as
what if
pretty as
that's
the Bone
even
Temple.
what if that's what we see? I mean, maybe
Yeah,
Samson
maybe.
in some way continues to build that bone temple in his own limited.
in his own way.
He's
But
going
But
to
I
wear
love, I
Kelson.
love it because it could be anything. Like Samson could be trying to resurrect him from the dead.
Yeah,
We're gonna go full allegory for resurrection.
they just
I'm
they still say-
1,000% delighted by any option. Anything that happens, I'm going to be pretty delighted by, I think.
Well, they make a pretty. I mean, we see those like three random people, and two of them end up being the two people that are like captured. One of them pregnant.
Yeah,
but,
right,
the three people. One of them's turned, and he turns right away. Like he gets bit, he's infected, throws up, and he's gone. But when Samson is given that concoction, he's like bitten, he's clawed, he's coughed on. All these things that would normally change you and make you rage have no more effect on him. So I think he is in a sense cured from that rage virus.
Well, he has it
'cause
in
he-
him. I think. Yeah, I think because it's in
Yeah.
him, he's in, and we saw a little bit of that hinted at. And this is so interesting to me how well this works. We have that hinted at in the second film, where we have the idea that you could be a carrier, that you could be immune to the virus and not become infected, but still carry it. And we also have, which I did not remember this, but I guess there is one child that speaks in the first film, a rage victim. He says something like, I hate you, or something like that to Jim early on in the film. And so there's also precedent for language still being present to some degree. And so that
Yeah,
just
and
changes it, like, go
I
ahead.
think
he
it's tied to,
says-
because I think if from the second movie, the mother, who is sort of I mean, she's affected by it, but she doesn't become a rage monster. She may have become like a Samson, she might have ended up being one of these like more intelligent rage victims.
Well,
If
I
it
mean,
had progressed for her, maybe. I don't know.
Samson very specifically, his last words are "thank you,"
Yeah.
because there's a change, and I don't think though that's like. I mean, every line of dialogue in this film is purposeful.
He's conscious. I think
Garland
he's
doesn't-
conscious to some degree at the end of that film.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah, I think he's very conscious.
Whether
of-
he
of-
stays that conscious or not. But
That's
Yeah.
what I'm wondering too.
yeah.
Well, and what's really interesting, I guess, even more as we discuss this, is like, I don't know. It almost in some ways forces us to confront our own assumptions about the genre, because we're buried in 28 Days Later. We're going, oh, this is a zombie film. If you're bit, you're gone, which has been kind of true, but they've been dealing with it as an infection. Here's the way that it adapts, certain amount of months later. Here's the way it adapts, years later. And so that's fascinating too, because it's almost this meta thing where we as the audience have to come out of our own stupor or assumptions as well and go, oh, well, just because I think they're monsters, or just because the genre has taught me to expect these things, well, maybe I have to think about it another way. What if these people are more reachable than I have ever considered? And how do we act going forward if that is true? How does that change?
There's still a baby back in the little island community. Like, we didn't address that. I honestly thought we were going to be seeing a lot about the baby,
I thought so too. I thought in that family, the father, Aaron Taylor Johnson, we didn't see him at all. Yeah.
It feels like the baby has to come back around into the formula, the mix of plot at some point, because that's a major development of this whole scenario.
Well, and that might be the challenge for the
the
next film. If it's really about redemption and we're looking at these themes that are on the table, the next film is probably about like, hey, once the truth is out there, how do you bring these disparate groups together? Because obviously everyone's got their formed thoughts about what the rage victims are, who the other side. I mean, Kelly has brutalized many, many people, and she has to live with that. I don't know that that's like, that pregnant woman is still out there. Are we going to run into her and she's going to say, this person helped murder my family? I guess what I would wonder is, like, they have to propose, how do we fix the world? But is that really something that this story can tell? Because I agree with you, Claire. I don't know that is. I think that's a fairy tale. I don't know you can fix the world. Go ahead,
I'm going to throw my hypothesis is that the redemption theme in the last movie is actually going to be about the redemption of the rage virus zombies becoming human enough so that we can all kind of reconnect and bring peace to the world.
Right.
I know that sounds so lame coming from me, but I do think that that's kind of the idea, is to set up the arc where we can teach empathy, where we can have people that turn into monsters turn back into humans again, because I think it ties into pretty much all the themes that Garland was trying to address.
Well, how does that not touch every character? I totally agree. Like, look at Jimmy is a monster. The Jimmys,
Samson,
monsters. Samson's a monster.
Ripping people's skulls out of.
You could say that some of the humans that some of Spike's family, are monstrous in the ways that they have treated, or the ideology they've accepted, or the outside world. They've abandoned the UK to this victim. I think you're exactly right, Christian. I think that's maybe the challenge is. It's the exhaustion that you were talking about. It's like, all right, well, if the truth is we can turn monsters back into humans, how do we go through that process if it's exhausting and draining and difficult when it's easier to just kill monsters? I'm kind of knocked off my feet by that. Oh, I sat in this film at one point, and Phil, I relate to you when you were kind of searching for an answer on one of these questions, but I sat in this film at one point when I think Kelson was talking about the world being hard to remember, and I was like, my world is so broken, and I think that we all feel that so much these days, and I don't know, it's great that we have stories like this, but it really does bring up a lot of feelings.
It does. Grace is a hard thing to find when you're talking about having grace for people that are just hateful and angry, and I do think there is an understanding where that comes from, fear and pain, and obviously that fear and pain is misguided most often with people like this, whether it's because they've been told, like especially online, that women are the issue, or that people of color are the issue, immigrants. There is the infection. Like, cult leaders infect people when they're at their most afraid and emotional. And all these people are looking for is someone to take the blame for where they're at in life. When they are afraid and deeply hurt and traumatized, and I mean, religion is really good at doing that too. Oh, you're like in the worst place in your life. God can help. You know what I mean? Instead of, and then every solution that they have going forward is based around that idealistic kind of kernel that's been planted into them and is allowed to grow from that pain. And everything sort of revolves then around that. And when you have that seed in someone, it's really hard to pull it out. It's really hard to take that and dismantle it until, I mean, I don't know if it's manipulative to use someone's then new emotional state to replant something else, or to use that same sort of manipulation to pull people out. I don't know much about how they pull people out of cults. I know there's like a whole process, and it's really demanding.
Yeah.
And it's really you isolate that person.
They call it deprogramming.
Deprogramming
for a reason.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it's and how do you do that to everybody? You know what I mean? How do you do that to like a mob of people, or a hive mind
entire
of people?
globe. Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that comes to my mind about what we're talking about here, like the possibilities and the hard questions like you're answering, Brian, about like how do you reform society when all of society is in some way a victim or a perpetrator in really heinous ways, and sometimes both, right? Like there are victims and that are perpetrators as well. And again, the depiction of the Jimmies in that regard is really, really well done. It's nuanced, it's interesting. But the thing that comes to my mind is, and I think is very hopeful, because it's an instance in our own history of, I think, seeing a solution to that kind of social rebuilding that worked well, is the decades-long court system that was deployed in Rwanda after the Rwandan genocide, where it was they deployed a multi-tiered system of justice, right? But at the heart of it, I think, was a community-based court system that was difficult. It was people coming together in a neighborhood, and just like neighbors coming together and speaking the truth openly and radically. We said the word radical so much in this podcast. And
It's like the 80s in here.
yeah, and deploying a certain amount of empathy, or probably what would be thought of as a radical amount of empathy, and recognizing that you couldn't just carve out all of the bad players out of your society. Like, you can't just eliminate them all. And
There's always going to be bad people.
It's
just people.
yeah, it's and that whole system and story, I think it would be really, really interesting to see some sort of depiction of that in this story.
Well, let me take it to this place. There's one thing I did want to share that comes from an IO9 review of the film that speaks to what you were saying, Phil. And they were talking on the Jimmies, and the quote is, with Jimmy and Spike's side of the story, we see the lengths people will go to cope with such an impossible tragedy. Who is to blame for the fact that 28 years ago the world went to complete shit? People need someone to blame. They need some way to get even, and it's a mindset that provides scary results. And I think we see that so much in our own world right now. But the one thing that we're trying to focus on this year at Fanbase Press is, and this, we're still working out exactly how this concept is formed, or the way we approach it. But the idea is of bringing stories into action. And stories like this, I think the criticism that I hear very often, even though that stories matter, is that we have an abundance of media illiteracy. Obviously, when people are surprised that the Homelander is the villain of the TV series, we're reaching a breaking point. But we also have a lot of disillusionment, I think, and people feel like Sure, here we've laid all these themes on the table, but what are we going to do? We're going to go on to the next movie. We're going to go on to the next comic or something. So I'm not expecting anyone to have answers. I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot. But let's just open some discussion. Is there anything that you think we can actually take from this film to bring into our own world? Any literal action or approaches to bettering ourselves or the world around us? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? I don't want to put anyone on the immediate spot. But go ahead,
Sure,
Phil.
no, no.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, the Mormons have it right. You do it individually. You go door to door. You talk to people. I think, we're dealing right now. As I'll go to this online, we're dealing right now with a constant state of mob mentality. Like it is, it's continuous. It doesn't stop. The mob mentality doesn't stop, and I think we have to step away from conversations online, conversations in that realm, in that world, and give people a human face to look at, and human words and human emotions. I'm going to get personal.
Sure. Yeah.
I was having a conversation with my dad in person. This was back before Trump was first elected, just before that, and we were talking about healthcare and Bernie Sanders, and he said something, and I got more emotional than I usually do in conversations like this. I don't let myself get upset, but he saw that and he backed down, and he became suddenly open to my idea because he saw the emotion. And you can't do that online. You can't actually see someone's emotion.
You
there's
triggered
so much
his
of like,
empathy. You triggered his empathy.
exactly. And I think there's a case to be made for one-on-one conversations like that, and letting yourself be impassioned and letting yourself be affected, and not closed off, and showing that your empathy. I think your empathy will reach people who have had empathy in the past, or my dad's a pastor, so he does have empathy for people, and I've seen him have empathy for people, but it is, I don't want to go far down the rabbit hole, but so, and I think people who are caught up in political cult-like ideologies or religious cult-like ideologies, they do have empathy for specific people. They may have empathy for their kids. They may have empathy, and I think there's a way to tap into that empathy and broaden it, and even if it's a little bit at a time. I think that is probably the most effective way to deal with what's happening in our world, and you start to infect enough people with that. I think you start to see a broader change. But dealing with the mob, dealing with a massive raging people running at you, it's hard to change that trajectory and that course. As we see in this film, you run away. You ultimately end up having to run away.
Well, it's interesting.
Otherwise, you might respond with that same rage. It's yeah.
The personal connections are so important, and I think you're exactly right, Phil, that part of what we don't always realize, even though it's there all the time, is like social media and technology have really made us have less personal connection in our life. There's benefits to it, but we don't the idea you're saying about sitting down face to face. Sometimes we don't even acknowledge what that simple act, whether you even have a conversation of substance. The idea of sitting with another human. I mean, look at this film. Sit on the grass with another being and look at the moon.
While doing a bunch of drugs.
These are the reasons we are human. We're not here to tweet. We can do it, but in some ways we've forgotten that is such a vital part of who we are as animals, or whatever you want to consider us, the society of human beings. We've gotten away from some of those things. I don't know. I won't say any more on that. Christian, what are your thoughts on this subject?
Oh man. I thought I'd have something more to say, but I don't. More or less that I I know that people are doubting the ability for story to change things, but I think that that's when you get endless about it. That's when you just get relentless with trying to spread the message and trying to
Hmm.
share the idea. Because I do think ideas change the world. It starts as a small seed, and then it affects generations over time. And that's how real change is implemented. It never happens dramatically, immediately. And when you see people today trying to force change, it obviously there's a million ramifications in the past 24 hours, let alone. But these things usually take time. You're planting the seeds of what's going to be growing into the next generation, into what's going to be the new way of doing things. And I think that's where the power of story lies. And I think things like this movie and messages that you see today are they might not have the immediate impact. And I think current culture and the way that technology and the internet particularly are designed is for immediate gratification, but the right now is not the idea. It's the longevity. It's the what legacy are you leaving behind? I think that's much more important and speaks more to the power of story than anything else. So yeah, that's sort of that's where I stand with that.
Those are great points as well, I think. I was reading a interview in the Hollywood Reporter with the European Film Academy. I guess he's the chairman. His name is what is his name? Mike Downey. I didn't know this individual, but he wanted to speak about the importance of stories culturally right now, and it touched on a lot of things that you were talking about, Christian, that I thought were so insightful and important. And he talked about how people don't always realize it, but like in the point we are with rising fascism in our world globally, fascism is going to try to minimize the importance of culture and art within our societies, and we not only need to support those and be incredibly vocal about how important they are for healthy societies, but also like what you were saying, he was arguing if we don't point a way, if we don't show the ideal, what could happen, if people can't imagine another possible world through our stories, they're not going to get there. And I thought that was so interesting, that the idea that we require these to remind us what can be done to break us out of some of these ideologies that we get locked into. Claire, what are your thoughts on what we can do to bring this
I
story
think
into action?
you've all covered it very well, but I think the only thing I would add is that there's no end point in telling the stories
Yeah.
to make change. There's no, e- even when we have, like Philip was saying, a one-on-one conversation with someone, that conversation isn't the final solution. Oh, that's a bad phrase. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that's not
But you're
that's
right.
not
It's not the cure. It's not the
yeah,
cure.
even
Yeah.
if you have that meaningful conversation, there's no switch that just gets flipped and then everything is okay. It's a ongoing, all the time conversation. It's exhausting. It doesn't, and I was talking about this justice system that happened in Rwanda at the end of the genocide, and that happened for officially for like a decade. I guarantee you it's still happening today. There's still some element of that, some level of that, some shadow of it that still happens every single day. Maybe two generations after the actual events, it's still happening, and it's and maybe I'm going back to that reactionary element that I have of there is no single ideology, there is no fix, and so our stories have to be we have to look, get ourselves out of a mindset of, oh, if we could just tell the right story, then I'll learn something and everything will be what it should be.
Yeah.
That's not the point of story. The point of story is that, and I think society, like, this is how we evolved, right? Like, hundreds of thousands of years of Neanderthals and humans and all coming together has been coming together as social groups that can affect each other. And we did that by telling stories, and we've never stopped doing it. We'll never stop doing it. We have to just be out of the mindset of, oh, we're going to find the right story to tell and it's going to fix all of the things. It needs to be a mindset, I think, of we have to keep telling the stories every single day, bring together our groups, tell the stories every single day, and it doesn't stop.
It's such a great point, Claire. I'm so glad that you made it because I think it ties into our worldviews and our approaches to life. And probably back to Kelson if we go deeper, but like it's so many people view political activism these days that way. I'm going to participate in this many elections and then I can step away and it's done. Or I'm going to help out the environment till this point and then we fix the problem. And it's like, that we're talking about changing the way we live our lives and accepting that things are going to exist beyond you, and when we talk about stories, I think it's both important to know how powerful stories are and also understand that there's a limitation, that the story doesn't fix the world for you. It gives you the guide. It pushes you forward. You still have to take the action. But also, we maybe have lost what you're saying about like almost the village, that helps raise everyone, that comes together in times of strife. The point of the stories, we're at the point where I think we have made stories so much consumer products that we're going, well, this story's not new. It has no use. It's just like, whatever, The Empire Strikes Back. Fuck it. And you're like, well, why are we telling that story again? Is there a purpose within society why we're telling that story? Because that's why we started telling these stories. And that's why we told the same stories. And yes, they change and adapt and we add new things to them. But people need to learn these lessons. And they also need to be reminded of these lessons. We lose these lessons as we go through life. We forget about things. So I think you're spot on with that, Claire. Thank you so much. Well, let's before we run out of time, where does everyone want to see this franchise go next? I know we talked about the potential inoculation of the entire Rage society, but is there anything specifically that you want to see in the next film, which predictably should be the wrap up of this trilogy? Christian, what do you think?
Um, I mean, I can see it being neatly packed. I also could see potential like I think they mentioned that if it didn't work out that they were thinking about doing like TV shows and stuff like that. And I was like, all right, maybe. Um, I don't remember off the top of my head though. I guess for this last one, I kind of just want to see how Jim fits back into the story after gosh, it's been like what 20 years or something or close to that. And then more importantly, I do want to see where Samson's story kind of ends
Oh,
because I feel
absolutely.
like that's like my favorite character at this moment now that the
Yeah.
Doctor's gone. So yeah, that's more or less it. I just want to see how it neatly wraps and then see what it contributes long term to the zombie genre because again, I love zombie stories, but yeah.
Well, and we did not give a shout out to him, but Chi Lewis Perry, who plays Samson, phenomenal
Yes.
acting as well. He's got 3 lines in the film and just emotes so much through his eyes and his facial
Yeah.
emotions. Um, Claire, what are you looking for from the film, the final
Um,
film,
you
potentially
know,
final film?
yeah, exactly. I mean, my expectation will be, I would presume that we'll have some sort of radical point of view shift again. Maybe we go back to Spike and boy, what I would love to have some focus on Kelly and her like point of view as well. I don't know. I don't know what they'll give us, and I'm kind of like that's kind of the vibe of the movie, right? I was talking at the beginning of the podcast about just I'm very delighted that you never quite know what to expect in terms of storytelling device with Garland and it's going back to Danny Boyle's hands. Like
Yeah.
it just like I really feel like anything could happen. Um, I expect in the short term, we might be having to, live through some uh, v interesting, sad, I don't know, news about where is Selena and Hannah. It feels like they're not there in the
Right.
story. And who knows? It doesn't necessarily have to be sad, but yeah, I expect it probably will be a little bit. And I'm prepared for that. I lived through um, worse, I suppose, in stories. I hate it when characters get like killed off screen or whatever off screen and then they're
Yeah.
just gone. But I get it. I do get it.
Sometime
Um,
28 years. Thanks,
Yeah.
Can happen.
Yeah,
All can happen.
I don't know if it'll get tied up in a bow. I would very
I'd be
much
very
love
surprised if it.
I would love for there to be at least like a direction given. Like I
Yeah.
would love for the answer to be, oh, there is a scientific way forward and we're going to start taking steps towards that. I would be satisfied there. I think it's still a very interesting question, especially if we confirm that there aren't that this is, an event that is isolated to the British Isles. Like we still have a question of like
How
outside
far did it get?
forces
Yeah.
coming into play, and that's whew, what a vacuum there is there, right? Like, but I don't see there being enough storytelling scope, like space for them to really tell that story. So that's interesting. I don't know.
I think you're right. I think we're going to be unable to predict what's to come, but Alex Garland probably has something in store for us. It's interesting too. I'm now thinking Jim, our hero, is teaching history and is very heroic in his cameo. Also pushed a guy's eyes through the back of his head with his thumbs. So we're dealing with the same. It's just very impressive how much everything ties in for each of these characters. There's a lot of meat here to devour. If I guess there's a potential feast, if you will, if I make the metaphor work there. But we'll see. Again, my metaphor is Alex will see this feast and be like, well, but here is what I actually prepared you down the hall, and we'll eat that instead. So, Claire, Phil, what are your thoughts? So what do you want from a wrap up of this trilogy?
Yeah, I mean, this is, really a coming of age story, kind of, for Spike.
Definitely for Spike. Yeah.
And I feel bad for any young person being brought up in our world currently. So having to deal with the world the way it is right now and the chaos, the last few years especially. So I'm curious as to how he will be changed when he returns home, because I think we'll get that. I think we'll get him. Any hero's journey ends with someone returning home.
Right.
Lord of the Rings is like the ultimate, sort of, Stranger Things recently. There's always something that you bring home with you, whether it's good or bad. And so I'm curious to see how Garland is specifically going to deal with that, with all of these characters sort of living in Spike's head now. What is going to change him? What is going to make him become the man that he's going to become? And I think that'll be really, really telling in what sort of is on Garland's mind when writing these, is how Spike is going to come back. So I'm very curious about that. I'm actually looking forward to that.
Excellent. Well, as we always do, let's wrap up by giving some recommendations. If people liked 28 Days Later, The Bone Temple, or our conversation, what else would you recommend to them? Doesn't have to be zombie specific or anything. If there is a long form poem that you think would relate to this conversation, or an album or something, feel free. So Christian, I'll go back to you. What would you recommend?
Oh man, because I did this one last time. So like obviously I still think The Last of Us heavily inspires a lot of Alex Garland's his form of storytelling. Man, for this one, I'm honestly just gonna give a shout out to Nia DaCosta. Check out her movies because I think
Excellent.
that she did an excellent job with this one. And yeah, that's all I got this time around. So, yeah.
Between the musical choices and dance scenes in this and the fight sequences, like especially the training montage in the Marvels, I'm like,
Yeah.
what a fantastic action director, like
Yeah.
Really great.
Yeah.
just like really knows how to nail that stuff on screen. Claire, what are your recommendations?
Well, I know what I'm going to be doing this next week. I find myself needing to go and listen to Duran Duran, the Duran Duran album that a lot of this music came from, Rio, Notorious. But my favorite album is the 1993 Duran Duran album. It just So good. Ordinary World. Like it was such an effective music choice. So I'm going to be listening to that. I'm finding that after watching this movie, I was thinking quite a lot about Alex Garland's earlier work, The Beach. I think that it's very clear in this movie how much he's like been thoughtful about creating cult leaders. And I think going back, I was really struck by like the Jimmies and then thinking about Tilda Swinton's character in The Beach and the some of the characters within that group like really echoed a lot of, there's a lot of you can just see how his mind has developed in creating these kinds of characters. So I want to go back and watch that. And then my out and out recommendation is Margaret Atwood's Mad Adam trilogy, Oryx and Crake, The Year of the Flood, and Mad Adam, 3 books, which are post-apocalyptic, dystopian, ironically, or not ironically, but coincidentally, the main character in the first book, at least, Oryx and Crake, and he's kind of a character in subsequent books, is named Jimmy the Snowman, which echoes these characters, although he's really more the Kelson character, kind of in a way, but it's, you start off this story with this character, Jimmy the Snowman, who has been tasked with being maybe the last human on Earth and has been given the caretaking role over a group of newly engineered, genetically different humans. And the parallels with being an educator of humanity, about humanity, to these childlike beings and reestablishing society and the roles that this character may have played in the apocalypse society and the events that lead up to it. It's a gorgeous books. It's Margaret Atwood, for freak's sake, but they're beautiful books and deal with so many of the like interesting kinds of science versus ideology versus the nature of evil versus like narcissism and all the stuff. They're brilliant books. Really, really good.
Excellent. And Phil, what do you got for us?
I have 2 recommendations, but first I should say that the Jimmies in this are actually based on, I found out, a real life figure in the UK named Jimmy, who was a narcissist and apparently a much beloved children's TV show kind of host who ended up being an absolutely wretched human being.
Absolutely.
So it's this is sort of an extension of that sort of narcissistic. But the 2 recommendations are Hamnet, which I saw recently, which is very much about how art and story can heal us and change us as people. And really beautiful film from another very amazing female director who also did a Marvel film. And also I'd recommend Begonia because it does dive into the mindset of someone who is very wrong-headed, and you feel more empathy for that person coming out of it. And I think there's some thematic connections that could be made to what we've been talking about here with the 28 series of films to Begonia directly. So also a really interesting film that I liked a lot this last year.
Excellent. Well, I just got to say, Christian, Claire, Phil, this was a truly fantastic discussion. It was amazing how poignant and deep and relevant not only the film, but the thoughts that each one of you shared were. So thank you for making some time and being vulnerable to share that stuff with us today.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bryant.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. And let's let people know what else you do besides talk about Bone Temple. I've just realized I can't believe we got through an entire 28 years later podcast without talking about any zombie Dong. It was not mentioned. It was not mentioned. I mean, I know he got pants at one point, but oh well, we almost did it. Well, besides talking about zombie Dong, what else do you guys do? What fun things should our audience know? Christian, why don't you let us know where we can find you and your work?
Sure. You can follow me on X and underscore Angelus and all my handles. Go to TheDeMonster.com. I'm working with Sammy DeMonster on a bunch of content on Substack. And then I'm actually taking this moment to announce that I'm also editing a comic book that Kevin Smith is actually producing called The Devil and Daisy Dirt.
Yes.
It's an adaptation of my friend Alex's play Across New Jersey that's been doing really well, surprisingly. I mean, not surprisingly. I mean, it's awesome. But yeah, and then was able to assemble the teams for it. I'll announce now for, I guess, an exclusive. Tom Mandrake, the creator of The Spectre, is actually going to be our artist.
Oh, that's cool.
Then thank you. And then what is it? Micah Myers is going to be our letterer, and obviously I'm editing, and yeah, and we're still looking to get the thing going. But yeah, obviously I like horror, and so that'll be a fun Jersey Devil story. But yeah,
That's super cool. Super cool.
thank you.
Claire, where can we find you and your work online?
I could almost defer to Philip on this, but I'm just going to send people over to check out what we're doing with POPSKL Podcast as well. You can go over to our website, popsklepod.com. It's POPSKL POD. We've been talking about Stranger Things. What else have we been talking about other than
Talking about
Stranger Things?
Well, we'll be talking about Star Trek Academy.
That's true.
Starfleet Academy.
Starfleet Academy, yes.
Yeah, in the next day or two here.
Stranger Things.
I mean, just a lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff.
We've been slowly working our way through Twin Peaks. That'll be a thing soon.
Yeah.
We did hit up Superman. We did talk about Superman
Yeah.
earlier in the year. I know that was brought up in this podcast. So, yeah, things.
Excellent. Anything you want to add, Phil? Anywhere where you can find you and your work?
I mean, you can find me at Phillip Creates, Phillip with 2 L's. Yeah, I occasionally still get out and do some live comedy stuff because it's fun, and working on my own projects and things. We'll see where all that goes.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you to you all. I will construct a bone temple in memorial to this conversation.
Fantastic.
Well, that wraps things up for this episode of the Fanbase Weekly. I do want to encourage everyone to check out Fanbase Press and the Fanbase Weekly on social media, on Facebook, Blue Sky, Instagram, wherever you can find us. And we have the podcast, the Fanbase Weekly, on Apple Podcasts, so you can subscribe to the show there, rate and leave reviews. Those definitely help us, so please do those. Also, don't forget that you can email us and become part of the conversation. We've got a Gmail at thefanbaseweekly@gmail.com. Send us your comments, questions, concerns, or what you thought of the Bone Temple. We would love to share your thoughts with our listeners in an upcoming episode. Additionally, a thank you goes out to our sponsor, the creators of Sherlock Holmes and the Empire Builders. Sherlock Holmes and the Empire Builders is an epic, alternate world sci-fi adventure featuring the world's greatest detective as people have never seen him before. When Watson leaves Holmes to help Crick unravel the DNA helix and finds himself in the employ of England's most evil man, Holmes is forced to team up with an unlikely group to defeat this monstrous figure and return England to its status quo. But can he defeat the machinations of the man at the rudder of the country? Published in one volume for the first time, this new edition of the award-winning Holmes graphic novel series is graced with a brand new wraparound cover from Eisner winner Lawrence Campbell of Hellboy and the One Hand, and a brand new introduction from legendary writer J.M. DeMatteis of Moonshadow and Craven's Last Hunt. A darn good yarn, says Guillermo del Toro, Oscar-winning director of The Shape of Water, Frankenstein, and Hellboy. You can find Sherlock Holmes and the Empire Builders on trpwire1001.bigcartel.com or at Simon & Schuster or through Lunar Distribution. Be sure to check it out. Thank you for listening, everyone. This has been Bryant Dillon for Fanbase Press, where we celebrate fandoms and create new ones. Until next time, Memento Mori.